Welcome once again, friends. So these are the verses, 10 verses of the Bhagavad Gita from chapter 18. We'll go through the verses ones and twos. The first verse, 54. Lord Krishna says, "One attains supreme devotion to me and can be absorbed in Brahman, who is always inwardly calm, who never laments, is without desire, and who beholds all beings with an equal mind." Now, we may wonder, those of us who have gone through the entire series or have read the Bhagavad Gita, that this is a counsel which has been repeated in the past. And on one level you may say, yes, actually towards the end Krishna goes on to, revise these things and also tell us how again and again it is possible for us to attain oneness with Him. But also the mind still, and one of the reasons why we may say, why is he repeating these things? Or I've read them before, is because they are as simple as they sound. They are not easy to attain. At the same time, I think he's also repeating these words because without this calmness, as he's talking in the very beginning, Kriyanandaji said, bliss cannot be contained. God's nature is Satchit Ananda, ever conscious, ever present, ever new, ever conscious, ever existing, thank you, and ever new bliss. So that bliss, Kriyanandaji said, we feel it in fleeting moments, but we are not able to hold it because our consciousness is not calm, we are restless. Actually, if we come to think of it, Paramahansa Yoganandaji said, meditation, when we do in the beginning, we feel calmness and the other aspects of God for a while, and then at other times, we are still disturbed by the circumstances around us. One may also think that all these aspects of God, peace, calmness, joy, power, light, sound, wisdom, that they are all felt in all experiences of life. Love, also I forgot that you feel it through friends, through relatives, family members. But then what happens, it waxes and wanes. It increases, it decreases. And then we've seen through the explanation of the Gita that we try to grasp it more and more outwardly in things, in acquisitions. And in the end, Swami says the strange paradox is the more you try to acquire it outwardly, he says the more you lose grasp of it. But the more we start feeling that it is inside of us. You see, you may say this lifetime is a period given to us to not only explore and enjoy things outwardly, which God wants us to, Kriyanandaji used to say, but also to understand, to educate ourselves that this is really coming from somewhere else. For example, recently one of our teachers led a group of students in an exercise that let's close our eyes for a brief moment, he said, and ask ourselves, where are my thoughts coming from? Am I really creating them, processing them? And we very quickly realize that we are actually receiving them. What we say, what we think is naturally coming to us, you might say in the moment, and then very quickly we write it down or we say it aloud or we act on it. Likewise, these experiences of God are, yes, rightly experienced outwardly, but in a very fleeting moment. And Krishna is here talking of completely merging in the Brahman. And he is explaining 4 things which are essential. First, he says, is one has to overcome restlessness. Now for that, Paramahansa Yoganandaji said we have to learn how to keep the body calm, still and relaxed through, you might say, the practice of yoga postures, energization exercises, proper diet, and then we come to how to calm and the breath, which is also very restless. When the breath is restless, the mind becomes restless, and often you may have seen when the mind is restless, we are unwilling. We may know somewhere in ourselves that this is a correct point somebody is making, but because the chitta is so disturbed, for at least that moment we are totally unwilling to even come to terms with it. And we say, just sometimes we are wise enough to say, leave me alone for a while, because we know that we will regain our understanding once we are calm. So calmness, overcoming restlessness is the first important thing to be merged, to attain, you might say, God, and to attain His consciousness. Second thing he says is to give up likes and dislikes. And they are it's a wide topic, but let's take it simply in the case of people. There are some people we grow up, as we grow up, we say, oh, I like this person so much. And what happens? Often you may see we're putting out a lot of energy to simply be liked by them or to receive their like. And Kirandaji says, you see, energy is again a currency which was given to us to experience boundless energy through God and for others especially. He says, when you use it for others, he says you receive more and more of it. But again, if there's a like, oh, I like this. And what happens soon? We say, I dislike, because I like this thing so much, I dislike this person. And in that, we are trying to avoid them. I heard this beautiful story by one of our long-term acharyas who said that there was a particular person who came to our retreat in Italy, and she said, I don't know why, but from the very beginning I had a dislike for him. But then this person had, very interestingly, a likeness for her. He wanted to, which is in the way, he wanted to sit with her and explain his spiritual, maybe, experiences and confusions, and to get deeper understanding. On that degree, he wanted to receive help from her, but she was always pushing him, and he would come, he was a visitor, and each time she would think, how can I not do it? Till one day she thought, this is so strange. Here I am trying to overcome all my challenges, and for whatever reason this is happening, let me face it this time. And she went out of her way to find him, greet him, had coffee with him, sat, and they had a long chat for a couple hours. He spoke many things, and she said that the counsel I gave him, benefited him. I believe he certainly was very grateful. And then, because they had become friends by the end of it, she said, I was looking forward to seeing him each time. But interestingly, he never came after that, ever. So how interesting that when we, again, Krishna is saying, overcome these likes and dislikes, you will conserve a lot of energy, which can be helpful to experience these divine inner feelings. He goes on to say that we have to give up attachment to lamenting. I say attachment because often we complain. That's another hard lesson to learn. Lamenting, complaining of one situation or the other. And the reverse side is to develop acceptance, to simply accept things as they are and people as they are. And finally, Krishna says to behold all beings with an equal mind. Now, Kriyanandaji says here that how to achieve this? He says one simple way is often we come on the spiritual path, and either by the experience of joy through Kriya Yoga or by our devotional nature, we say, I have devotion for God, I love God. And Kriyanandaji makes the point that you see there is no upper limit to devotion. Not to say that we cannot perfect it, but devotion, you might say, as long as we have this I and thou relationship with God, He will always, as a friend who likes to play with us, test us more and more. That makes us spiritually more strong, and our love, the capacity to love, greater. So Swami says it is finally when we can, through devotion, through willingness to accept things as they are, people as they are, to understand this is God's Leela, to, say, okay, I know you are beyond the body. You see, restlessness, if correctly understood, belongs to the realm of duality, up and down. And a devotee, a sincere seeker, often has reached this point in his soul evolution and knowing where he or she says, what I'm seeking cannot be found in this world. The anguishing monotony, again, up and down, attaining and losing it. So he says that he understands that it is beyond this world altogether. And that brings us to the next verse, where we will see that how many times when we are evolving on the spiritual path, we think, if I do this, God will come to me. And Kriyanandaji and Krishna actually through these verses is making the point that he is above that law and how to still attain him. Let's read those verses. By supreme devotion to me, he can quickly realize me in my true nature, what and who I am. Knowing these truths, he can unhesitatingly enter into me. Over and above the faithful performance of all one's duties and taking shelter completely in me, he must still be received by my grace. Now again, as I was speaking, we are moving directionally in the beginning as in a linear way. We see that, if I exert my will, I receive a certain gift. In the world, as a child, you might say if you see fruits on a tree and you throw a stone, some fruits come down. So you can see a cause and effect over there. And we come on the spiritual path, we learn techniques, and sometimes we say, oh, I understand how law works now. So God is going to come to me if I do this much. Whereas Kriyananda ji here makes the point that He, God, who created law, operates through the laws. We certainly should operate through the law, but He says He Himself is beyond the law. And in order to find Him, attain Him, He says we must, how can I put it? We must understand that His grace is required for all of us. Now coming to the next two verses, mentally devote your every action to me. See me as your supreme goal. Uplift toward me every discernment of your intellect. Thus with love absorb all your heart's feelings in me. With heart absorbed in me, you shall also by my grace overcome every impediment. If, however, with any lingering thought of ego, you do not fully heed me, by absorbing my consciousness into yours, you may even then be thrown down to your own destruction. Now, again, that seems like a very strong verse coming from Krishna, but it's good that he's again reminding us of these things towards the closure of this Bhagavad Gita chapter, these final verses. What is that destruction that the Lord is talking about? He, in the just previous verse, says, very easy. He says, easily you can come to me, attain me, know me in my true nature. But then he says of this destruction which can come. Well, that destruction is because what happens is, as we are moving on the spiritual path, again I'll make this point, we think that we are the doer. And in the beginning, we have to exert our willpower. We have to understand that, yes, we have to move away from, let's say, bad habits to good habits. And then ultimately, but it says in the Gita, we have to go beyond habits altogether. We have to open ourselves to grace. And it is the grace which finally makes these things happen. So, this point of us trying to feel that, that God will come at some point, we have to always remain open to that. Also, God operates through channels, through instruments. That perfect instrument for us, who initiates us, whose consciousness uplifts us, is the Guru. And the Guru, again, the Guru's grace, we may sometimes see the Guru and feel that, oh, he's a person, or he is, just this form or such. But we have to understand that the real work that God is accomplishing through the Guru, who, yes, is in the body, in the form, for us to relate to him, is through his consciousness. It's an inner thing. It is an unseen thing. And Kriyananda ji says, if we finally, in our efforts, we reach very high with all the experiences, but we still, in the end, have this lingering thought of I-ness. We have not absorbed totally. We are not calm enough to allow God's consciousness to take over us. And there is this element of I am meditating. I am the doer. Krishna says you can cause destruction. Kriyananda ji says that state, which he's referring over here, can happen at the state of Savikalpa Samadhi, which is just before Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is the final and total eternal union with God. And Kriyananda ji says in Savikalpa Samadhi, during meditation, we become one with God, but the ego, when we come out of meditation, come out of that deep absorbed state, he says we retain that ego identity inside of us. That memory has totally not been shaken and offered. And he says there we can develop this thought that I was the doer, I did it, or it is me. Kriyananda ji once very beautifully explained it in one of his talks. He says we begin on the spiritual path with I and thou, I and thou. And he says then we go on to say, when we understand God alone has created, become everything, we say thou, thou, you, everywhere. And he says finally, when we attain oneness, it again becomes I. We realize that even us who were feeling separate because of God's created delusion, cosmic delusion, we were actually, it was He who became us. But we have to constantly, one by one, always continue holding that thought that it is God who is the doer. Now, this may seem very, difficult because this is not how society, at least today, is operating. People emphasize a lot on ego and personalities, but we have to remember what Krishna said in one of the verses, that of 1,000, he said, one seeks me. Of 1,000 that seek me, one truly finds me. Yoganandaji did say that our figures, our statistics are much better, success rate is much better. But nonetheless, we have to always keep this in mind that it is a devotee here, a devotee there, often in different places, that are seeking this very high, the absolute truth, as Krishna says, the most sacred of all secrets, he says towards the end, I have revealed to you. So we are seeking something beyond which there is nothing else to be sought. Right now we are living in a dream, Krishna says. He says, you are dreaming. This is because of his power which he has exerted of delusion. We are trying to overcome it. So it is good to keep always in mind that the truth is so hard. Once somebody asked Swami Kriyanandaji, why has God made it so hard for us to find him? He said simply, he said, because he wants to see how much we love him. And always keeping in mind that he is the source. Everything, including our devotion, our ability to love, ultimately comes from him. But because he's given us a chance to exert our free will, here we are proving our very best to him. Let's go on to the next verses. If indulging your ego, you should determine, I will not fight. You would have to fight anyway, obliged to do so by nature, your own as well as cosmic. I'll read the next verse also. O son of Kunti, that momentary delusion, that ripened fruit of a past karma, which has now made you reluctant to fight, will be snatched from you by another good karma, and you will find that you have no choice but to fight anyway. What is this fight? This fight is to free ourselves, you might say. And Krishna is so playfully suggesting, explaining the intricacies of this game that he has created us. And he's saying, for a moment, let us say we fall into this delusion. So many times it happens, we say, okay, I'm going to meditate the whole night tonight. And you feel you're rested, you're really resolving, you've told everybody your mobile phone is on silent. And Swamiji says a few hours into the night, he says, you are still wanting to do it. But he says, what happens? He says, a habit overcomes, the habit to sleep. Now, that's not a bad habit, it's a universal habit. But he says that's a samskar, or a tendency, comes up inside of us which says, this cannot happen. And Krishna is saying that, or so many times we are going very well on the spiritual path, and suddenly we realize, oh, God is demanding this from me, a separation of some sort from something we like. And we say, oh no, really, this one too? I thought this was not necessary. I thought I had proven myself enough. I am reminded of a verse, a line by Saint Thomas à Kempis, who lived in the 13th century. And he had a monastery high up in the mountains, I think in Germany. And one time he wrote, he used to have visions of Christ. And he used to get a deeper understanding through those. And in one of them he says, my Lord, I thought you were pleased when I left home. Then I thought you were even more pleased when I left family and job for your sake, renouncing everything when I entered the monastic, walls. But he says, now I am coming to see that you will be not totally pleased unless you receive from me the offering of my very own being, myself in totality, which is to say that we should actually, and now let's not see it in terms of leaving, even though that happens, but you see that happens on an inner level. What is really happening is you're receiving more of God. We are saying, okay, because this is so wonderful, because my friends, everything else, my job, my life itself, our ego, we didn't even create it. We may have enhanced it by our will, wrong use of the will, but we don't create these things. So when we realize that such a mighty force, we are actually just acting because of an impulse which is implanted in us by nature itself, you might say by God himself, we say, okay, everything is yours, may I live to do thy will alone. And by doing that will, we will overcome, as Krishna says, bad samskars, bad habits of reluctance, or of sometimes, even high on the path, unwillingness to fight. And he says, you will slowly overcome this. Kriyanandaji makes a very interesting point over here, which I have of late been practicing, and it's very reassuring. He says that, you see, Krishna in this verse is also saying that resolve very firmly that you are going to not give up. And often we should make that resolve, I would say, once we have, let's say, a good experience or a nice day, or God has answered our prayer and we are very pleased, in our heart with Him. We should make that firm resolve that I will not give up, because Kriyanandaji says that with that resolve, he says God Himself will keep you moving forward on the path. Sometimes through Prakriti, through Divine Mother, which is to say through manifested things. So you may find that you're dejected and you're really not having that energy in yourself to do something, but here comes a friend, or somebody brings something, or something interesting will happen in your life, which will again bring your energy up. Because see, we are going through karma, so dejection is often one of those tests that come to us repeatedly on the path. But then because we made a resolve, and the highest resolve, that we want ultimately the joy of God, freedom in God, he says that God Himself will ensure that He brings you. Also at another time, it is explained in the Gita that final merging with God is actually not a process of effort. Effort is required in the beginning. Actually, all our effort is required. But as we move closer to Him, Kriyanandaji says, by His grace, by His power, He pulls you inside it. He says that you have no choice after a certain point but to move and merge into Him. And he says at that point, no effort is required. So I think these verses are pointing in that direction. The next verse says, O Arjuna, the Lord is lodged in the hearts of all beings. His cosmic delusion compels them to revolve as though they had been mounted on a machine. I mean, again, this is, I think he's talking of free will over here. We often have a question, how much free will do I have? But let's again, as we've, just discussed in the previous verses, always remember the choice between us, Yoganandaji said, is only two choices. Do we want to move closer to Him? Do we want to move away from Him? I think after going through the entire reading of the Bhagavad Gita, understanding all about life and where we are, our souls ought to find rest, Kriyanandaji says it is hard to even imagine that anybody would choose the other path of moving away from God. So let's keep our will in that direction and keep moving forward. These are now the last two verses. O Arjuna, make Him alone with all eagerness of heart your refuge. By His grace you will attain the uttermost peace and find shelter for all eternity. Thus has wisdom, the most secret and sacred of all secrets, been given to you by me. Reflect on it, then do as you feel to do. And those words, those closing words are, you might say, the mark of God's love. It is a mark, could have been spoken only by God Himself, and are often uttered by gurus also. Remember when Sri Yukteswarji, Yogananda's guru, once found him returning after I think a year of leaving the ashram and wandering to different sadhus and yogis in search of deeper realization. When he came back, Yoganandaji had understood his error and he apologized. And Sri Yukteswarji said, "Oh, you have come. Let's go to the kitchen and find something to eat." And Yoganandaji looked at him. He said, "Are you not upset that I left you?" And Sri Yukteswar said, all I want from you is your happiness. I only want to see you evolve in that direction. And he said, I have no other expectation. I have no expectations from you. Likewise, many people argue, why is there so much suffering? Why does God not intervene? Well, we have to see that maybe His love is so high, so great, so non-expecting, impersonal from His side, we might say, that He creates us with full power, which a saint does manifest when he finds God, that the power to move towards Him or away from Him. And here, after explaining all these verses to Arjuna in the very middle of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, our own lives individually, Krishna is saying, I have explained everything to you. I have instructed you how to go about it through techniques. I have clarified your questions on the concept of Guru, life, reincarnation, so many things. And very lovingly he looks at his disciple and simply says, now do as you wish to do, which is also a mark of deep respect. Krinandaji, somebody asked him, what is most important thing in a relationship? And they said, we thought he would say love. And Swamiji said, respect is very important, most important. He says, when respect comes, he says, love will follow. But he says, love by itself can become personal. So here actually we might say that God has deep respect for us. Seems very strange. But on the other hand, if we imagine Babaji cleaning the feet and utensils of a sadhu in Kumbh Mela, who Swami Lahiri Mahashayaji thought was even, not even a true sadhu, again reminds us how much love God has for everybody, how much respect he has for everybody. And it is out of that deep respect that he is telling Arjuna, who also remember is his divine friend. And in friendship, so many times we see today that people try to bring friendship down to a level where we agree upon each other. Whereas true friendship, yes, actually true friendship may disagree on many issues, but still be moving in the same direction. But true friendship has deep respect, has deep non-attachment, has concern but no personal interest. And you can imagine with what pain Krishna has explained the whole Bhagavad Gita. And now as we see, saying, now do as you wish. So let us take deep his love and his grace and concern into our lives, into our meditations, into also how we express these things to others. Into, on one level you might say, as we express and channel these things, into how we can make it practical when we are interacting with other people. With our children, giving them the understanding, giving them all the advice, of course, cautioning them of all pitfalls and challenges, and as a deep friend, looking to them beautifully and saying, now I have told you everything, do as you wish. I once asked one of our acharyas, it was a disturbing situation that I was facing with a group and somebody was going here, somebody there, and I said, what should we counsel to people? And he just smiled, he says, just tell people, keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open, which is to say that ultimately everybody has to make their decision in life. We are all coming from such a long journey. We identify the love in Guru, but the Guru also never expects, oh, do this, do that. They will counsel us, sometimes very strongly, but in the end, they have the same counsel. Keep your eyes open and do as you wish. May God bless you all.